I would encourage anybody who's in leadership to find your curiosity. There's a lot happening in the world. There's a lot of change going on. There's a lot of big problems that we're all trying to solve. If you're not curious, you're going to have a hard time moving forward. You're going to have a hard time being a leader because your curiosity is what opens you up to hearing what other people have to say. It's what opens you up to something you thought was completely different.
Welcome to What Works, where nonprofit leaders share real stories about what makes impact possible and their organizations thrive. And when we reduce the internal cost of leadership, we build teams that are healthy and effective. I'm your host, Marla Moody, a transformational leadership coach and author with a passion about helping leaders stay clear, resilient, and effective. Today's episode is about the challenge of doing the right work, not just the easy work. I'm joined by Brad Voss, CEO and Executive Director in the U.S. for Remade. He's led the shift in an organization that creates lasting impact, choosing the harder, more effective solution over the familiar one. If you ever wrestle with what's the right thing to do versus the comfortable thing to do, this conversation is for you. So get ready. Brad is here to tell us what works. Welcome, Brad.
Hi, Marla. Thanks for having me.
It's so good to be with you. Last time we talked, it was such a rich conversation, so I've been looking forward to it. Before we get started, Brad, if you would give us just a little idea of who you are and what Remade is, and then we will go into some of the shift of the organization and things like that.
Sure. It's important to know that Remade is the name of an organization that has been around for 30 years, but only recently has been called Remade. Before last year, we were known as Made in the Streets. Made in the Streets was an organization that started in 1995 in Nairobi, Kenya, to help street kids get off of the streets of Nairobi and move into a better life. 2 years ago, we rebranded and renamed and kind of remade our organization into something new and more exciting and something with better lasting results. And that's what we call Remade.
That's beautiful. It's funny when, you think about it, sometimes you have something that goes for a long time, but really to be effective, sometimes that pivot does need to happen, which comes with pain, but it also comes with effectiveness too.
That's right.
Before we get into it, Brad, why are you even working for Remade? I'm sure you could probably find easier jobs.
That's a great question. I often tell people this is the hardest job I've ever had, but also the most rewarding job I've ever had. I had a career as a local minister pastor for a number of years out of college and out of grad school. And then I went into business. I've figured out somewhere along the way that paid church work wasn't for me. And I really got excited about being in business and worked in a couple of different businesses. One was a consulting and training company, and then the other one was a vacation real estate development company. And I loved that work. And then I came to a crossroads in my life, and I was looking for my last job, not my next job.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a point where I think we find ourselves wanting to do something really meaningful in the world. And it's not that all work isn't meaningful. You just find yourself wanting to do something maybe it's a little more of a giving back or trying to make a difference in some of the biggest problems we have in the world. And I really thought that I would work locally. For most of my career, I've traveled. And so I was hoping to work locally and maybe in a local food pantry or a local shelter. Next thing I know, I'm on the way to Kenya. Through some weird circumstances and coincidences and who knows what, I wound up interviewing for a job as an executive director for an organization whose founder was preparing for retirement. So I'm the second generation leader of Made in the Streets, which is now known as Remade. And our founder retired after 20 something years, and the board hired me to come on. And I really came on to the nonprofit world not knowing a lot. I had some other background that wasn't necessarily nonprofit I thought I could use to leverage in this environment and in this type of industry. But I was also learning a lot on the job early on. And so starting in 2017, I inherited an organization that was doing good things. really good things. And I was thrilled to be a part of it, but also, a little skeptical of whether I could handle leading this really great organization that was already doing good things in Kenya and already helping kids to find a better life than the life they had on the streets.
That's really, really cool. And I do want to emphasize that you don't have to just have your whole life in nonprofit. Is a time, and I've interviewed other people where they've had a successful career and they do want to do that next thing, the thing that's maybe at the bottom of their resume, the volunteering. And so I love that you said it's the hardest job you've ever had and also the most fulfilling.
That's right.
Thank you for stepping into that. I'd love to have you walk me through that moment when you started realizing that the model that happened when it was made on the streets, it just wasn't feeling right. You just knew something needed to change. Could you walk me through those early ahas?
Sure. What's interesting about this story of change and this kind of story of transformation is that it wasn't really initiated by us. We had been doing the work on the streets in Nairobi to help kids leave the streets. We had a feeding program where kids could show up each day and get a meal. And from that meeting of kids, we would invite them to leave the streets and come into our residential care facility. By 2020, 2021 timeframe, we got enough for about 100 beds in our residential care facility. We were bringing 25 to 30 kids each year off the streets into that facility where they received daily meals, exercise, physical attention. Some of them were sleeping on a bed for the first time in their life. And we had an educational component where they went to school in small classes. We really tried to meet holistic needs. We had counseling for the mental health issues. We had good food and nutrition for the physical issues and sports and outdoor activity. We had education and we had spiritual growth as well. So we're really trying to be rounded in our way we're caring for these kids, mostly teenagers, kids from the ages of 12 to 16, who some had lived on the streets for a few months and many had lived on the streets for a few years. And so we were really growing that program. In fact, we doubled the size of it from the time I came on in 2017 until about 2020. We were moving into a really healthy place. Kids would stay in our educational component for about 3 or 4 years, and then we'd move into our vocational training and our skills development component for 2 years. And they'd stay with us for 5 to 6 years and then graduate, and we'd kind of help them settle what we call back into the world. And in 2022, we started hearing rumors that the government was going to make some changes. And we've heard these kind of things before, and we hear it all over the world. The government has a good idea, and sometimes it comes to fruition, and sometimes it doesn't. Well, this one had legs, and this one passed through the Parliament of Kenya, and this one got signed by the president right before he left office, and it went into effect. And in 2023, we were shown the new Care Reform Act in Kenya and the Care Reform Strategy. And part of that strategy involved closing down all of the residential care facilities for vulnerable children in Kenya. That includes all orphanages, rehabilitation centers, street-connected kid centers like we were working on. And at the time, there was a little over 800 of them that were told within 10 years they will all need to close down or transition into a different type of care. And our immediate reaction was kind of confusion and even some defensiveness on my part, especially some defensiveness. Why would you want us to change something that's going so well? Why would you want us to do something different when what we're seeing is so great? I can tell you now, looking backwards, what we were doing wasn't so great and it wasn't so successful. We just weren't asking the right questions. And so I'll be honest, our Kenyan operations team, the team in Kenya that runs the day-to-day stuff that's out there working on the streets, that team was the first one to come around and say, I think there's something here we need to pay attention to. We don't quite understand it, but we need to lean in, we need to listen, we need to learn. And so they kind of drug me along and pulled me into this place where I had to lean in and listen and be open-minded. And after we did our own research, we surveyed all the kids we had cared for. We had surveyed the ones who have gone on and left our program. We even surveyed some kids who still lived on the streets. And what we found overwhelmingly from these kids was that they were thankful and they were grateful for the care they were receiving. They really didn't feel bad about it, but they also really missed their families.
Mm-hmm.
And so we were faced with comments from kids like, oh, you guys are great and we love the help you're giving me, but no one can love me like my mom can. Wow. Or another kid one time said, I'm learning so much here and I'm glad I'm not on the streets, but I really do miss my brothers and sisters. I wish I could be with them. So here we are now going, oh, wow, what do we do? What do we do? Because now it's not just the government's, forceful movement to get us to change. Now our own research. Now we've kind of looked in the mirror a little bit and said, oh, we probably do need to change. But the reality is that's really hard to do. Really hard to do.
That pivot, I mean, because you had to learn everything. Like, I just want to emphasize the fact that it was somewhat forced on you in light of the catalyst of it. But I hear an openness to really, like, you asked, you went back, and you didn't diminish what was done, but you saw it's like, oh, that family element, that wasn't even like a consideration. Like, well, they're homeless, therefore they don't have a family. When you say it's hard, give us some understanding of what are those elements that really were challenging.
That is a great question. Because here's how hard it is. I think those of us who lead these impactful organizations, and when we lead things we're very passionate about, things that we just are so sold out to and so passionate about, it's really hard to be open-minded and to be willing to ask different questions because you've worked so hard to build this confidence in what you're doing. And in fact, it's even worse if you're raising money for it. If it's
Yes.
something that you're raising money for, it's even harder because you've got really good at convincing people what you're doing is really good and the right thing to be doing, so much that they're willing to write you checks and hand you money. So to look at that and say, man, maybe I need to ask different questions. Maybe I need to look at this from a different angle. Maybe I need to be curious. That's difficult just personally. It's difficult for leaders to have that kind of mindset that maybe they don't know everything. Maybe there could be another way. Maybe there could be a better way. So that's the first most difficult part, is dealing with yourself and your own pride in what you're doing and your own passion about what you're doing. And then I think the next biggest thing is probably being open to learn a new method. Then the next biggest thing, which is probably the hardest thing of all, is then, okay, how do I talk to others about this new thing or this new strategy when I'm not even sure how this strategy is going to work? In the beginning, you find yourself with a new strategy, you're almost operating out of it before you totally believe in it. But when you make these kind of shifts, these are fundamental paradigm shifts in how you're delivering the care. Still the same clients or kids or vulnerable children we're working with, still the same mission in mind. Give them a new life, a better life, a life off the streets. Those haven't changed. It's in between. It's what are you going to do and how are you going to do it that's going to change. In the beginning, you're still learning that, but you have to kind of be passionate about it from the beginning. You have to be kind of sold out to it before you're all the way into it. And that's difficult. And that's where the mistakes come. That's where you make, mess ups and learn along the way.
Completely, because I'm hearing passion, even in the midst of not fully knowing, curiosity. I'm assuming there's fear or discomfort. And then there is the idea of marketing and platforming and just so many different elements. And it's not just you and your internal work, then it's your team, it's the
Right.
people on the ground, and then, of course, eventually donors. How did you the internal struggles that you had, and then also how did you manage your team and bringing people along?
One of the things I got real comfortable with early on is that sometimes leaders have to be led. We talk a lot in leadership about being the leader. We talk a lot about setting the vision. We talk about a lot about the direction we're going. Follow me. Being good leader of followers. Sometimes leaders have to be led. We have to follow. And so this was a case where I had to lean on other people in the world of science and human development, people in the world who've done this work ahead of us, people who are researching what it's like for children to thrive in and out of homes, in and out of residential care facilities. I had to be a learner. You have to first be a learner. And I would say something I've learned looking back now a little bit is you got to have curiosity. Curiosity has been one of the most important values of a leader I have found in the last few years. And I would encourage anybody who's in leadership to find your curiosity. There's a lot happening in the world. There's a lot of change going on. There's a lot of big problems that we're all trying to solve. If you're not curious, then you're going to have a hard time moving forward. You're going to have a hard time being a leader because your curiosity is what opens you up to hearing what other people have to say. It's what opens you up to something you thought was completely different. But if you're curious enough about it, and so that really helped me. And I would say having that element of my personality for most of my life turned out to be something I needed. I didn't know I needed it. It turned out something I needed. And then that willingness to be led and to learn. And when I did, man, my eyes started being opened. The other thing about not just leaders, but all people is when you're going through change, it's difficult for someone to tell you what needs to be done. It's a lot better when you realize it yourself. When there's this aha moment or this eyes opening moment where you go, that's what we're doing. Now I get it. Now I get it. Right. And so if all you are is just like closed off and not open-minded, you're never going to get that aha moment. You may do it. In fact, we had people on our team in Kenya doing the operations for years that they just went through the motions. I know they weren't passionate about it. I know they didn't believe it. They just like, this is what you tell me to do, I'll do it. I don't think it's right, but I'm going to do it. And they never had that aha where they like, now I see, the other side. Now I see why this change is better for the children and for the families and for the communities. Those who did get that, they came to it because they were seeking it. They were seeking to learn. They were seeking to listen, seeking to, understand what other people have to say. And then when you do that, then you're able to talk more about it from a personal perspective, right? I'm not just here today or whenever I talk to people telling them, well, this is what the government wanted us to do. And so we made the changes to appease the government and keep our work going because this is what the government says. No, we're saying, well, we heard that, we questioned it, we did our own research, we listened, we came to our own new conclusions that there was a better way to do this work. It's not going to be easy. I'll get to that here in a minute, but there's something about this that's better. And when we came to that on our own, now that fuels the energy you need to go through the next hard phase, which is actually making the changes.
And you took, even with the ahas of people in country in Kenya, you went from employees to staff. And I'm not talking how you get paid. I'm talking about the idea of ownership. Because, everybody needs a job and they can do it and it's good. But my suspicion is there was some ownership and some extra passion once they understood that there's something to this.
Well, was there ever? And I have to be completely honest and say that they got it. Our in-country leaders in Kenya got it before I did. So there was definitely ownership on their part that I had to come to at a later date, which I love, right? That was one of the things we had always hoped for in our organization, that our local leaders would have ownership of the mission and ownership of the operation. And they have it more now than ever because they were the first ones to come to these conclusions and had to work hard to get me to listen and open up and be eventually kind of on board with it. Now we're all on it together, but it definitely gave them a kind of ownership and a sense of commitment to the work that they never had before.
That's beautiful. And I'm going to pause because this is something, it's a soapbox, and I want people to really hear it, is Americans a lot of time come in with the money, with their ideas, with their plans, and we put it on the people in the country. And we're doing it from a good heart. We feel good about ourselves, and sometimes we leave. And I really, really think it's important what you're saying and why it came about. That's not almost as important as you allowed it to come about. And instead of being threatened that almost they got it before you and they come along, but the desire to be curious and desire that the organization coming in with the money wasn't the ones that said, we have all the answers. How is that attitude of, it's not just about we can control things because we have the funds, but that partnership? How did that change what you guys did or the effectiveness of it?
Wow. I love that you paused and pointed that out because it's such a significant part of our story. And I think it's becoming a significant part of the world's story. For as long as I can remember, there's been this division kind of between East and West, or you could say between the minority countries and the majority countries, to where those in the West and the minority but have all the funds feel like they know what's best in these other countries. And even when it comes to big problems like poverty and homelessness and disease and lack of clean water and lack of nutrition, and I can go on and on and on. We come in a lot of times, we meaning the Americans and the Europeans, with our funds and say, here's the way to do it. We know how to do it. We've done this before. Do. That isn't always the best way. And so it takes some real humility to say, okay, we want to partner together. We want to provide as much funding as we possibly can. We want to work alongside our partners in these majority countries, but we really want them to kind of lead the way on how to do it. They know better about culture. They know better about resources that are available. They know better about the history. They know better about how these problems came to an existence. I mean, they so much more than we know. And I think for the most part, we know how to solve problems in our neighborhood, but why not let them tell us how to solve the problems in their neighborhood? And I'll tell you, I think for us, we had to swing the pendulum pretty far the other direction and let our Kenyan team really lead and really step out there and really take ownership so that then it could come back a little bit more to the middle to where we work together. We have an outstanding kind of joint leadership team now where we lead the organization together. The Kenyan team and myself working alongside each other, really in equality of leadership and in leadership of equality of authority as well. And so that creates this beautiful story, but also this beautiful message to the rest of the world that, hey, we're better when we work together. We're better when we listen to one another. And when the work is being done in one particular culture's neighborhood, maybe let that culture take the lead on how it's being done on the exact operation side of it. And that's hard. It's really hard. I can tell you, speaking from experience, I mean, we've only known one way of doing it. That's many, many years of doing it one way. To break that habit, it's going to probably take us many, many years to go the other direction. But even though it's hard, it's better. Even though there's a lot of tripping over ourselves and I've said the wrong thing, but I'm humble enough to let them tell me when I've said the wrong thing or done the wrong thing and then correct it and do it different next time. That's going to get more success in the long run. That's going to help us get to the root of some of these problems so we can actually bring about systemic change.
100%. I love that quote, equality of authority, that partnership. You're bringing stuff that they don't have. They're bringing stuff that you don't have. But yeah, the language, the culture, the history. You've used the word humbleness multiple times, and I think that really is important, especially for Westerners that are coming in with our education system, our money, everything else. There's so many lessons to be learned. Love that idea. And the other word that you didn't say is obviously there is trust. And it probably didn't maybe start with trust, but certainly trust has been built. What are your thoughts around that word or that concept of trust?
Trust is something that is essential. You can't work together cross-culturally without a level of trust. It doesn't get there overnight, right? It takes a lot of honesty and probably even more vulnerability to develop trust, right? And so just practically speaking, there's been times recently where my co-leaders in Kenya have sat down with me and said, hey, there's some things we need you to stop saying. And I'm like, what do you mean? I'm saying all these great things. Give me an example. And like, well, you tend to talk a little bit more about, money and what it can do than we're used to over here. And so when you do that, all the people on our staff start getting really excited and saying like, oh, well, Brad must have a cave full of money or a tree, that's dropping money all the time, and we have nothing to worry about. And I'm like, oh, no, that's not what I mean. I just mean more in the sense of I'm trying to provide hope and excitement and get people, feeling good. And they're like, yeah, don't do that here, because that sends the wrong message. The message you want to send is that, hey, we're gonna use the resources we have available, or we're not going to overextend ourselves, stuff like that. They've pushed back on beyond like that. And just even simple things. When you from America go over to Kenya and you talk to someone there and say, hey, how are you doing? Well, on our side, we mean just, keep it light, keep it casual, and I'm fine, you're fine, we're good. But over there, how you doing means like, are you making it today in life or not?
Yeah.
It comes across as a little different. And it also means if you ask me how I'm doing, that means you want to help me, probably financially.
Mm-hmm.
So here I have been asking all these people on our team, how you doing? How you doing? And they're like, oh, he wants to give me more money. He wants to solve my house problem. He wants to solve my problem with my kid. And I'm like, I didn't mean that. And they said, yeah, we know you didn't mean that. So stop saying it. Once we got to that level where they felt comfortable saying those things to me, and I was vulnerable enough to say, thank you for saying that. I'm going to change that. Now the trust is there, right? And until you get to that vulnerable spot where you can open up cross culturally. And the other big thing I learned about this cross culture between America and Kenyans is that Americans need a lot of encouragement at work. We're big on encouragement and prop us up and tell us we did a good job. Kenyans need a lot of challenge at work. Like they like to be pushed and challenged and expectations really high. And so we have to tell each other at times, hey, guys, I need a little more encouragement over here. You're challenging me a little too much. And then they say the same to me. They're like, hey, we need a little more challenge over here. You're being a little too encouraging. That kind of open conversation, that kind of real honest, cut through the mess and get right to the heart of it, that kind of communication, that develops really strong trust. So then when something comes up and you need to ask a serious question, you feel like you're getting the right answer. Or when you need someone to know how you really feel, you feel like they're really listening. So it takes having many years of open conversation with each other to develop trust.
Thank you for that. I traveled with the area leader, operations leader for Africa, and we already had a good relationship. And so we started in his country and we went to different countries. He explained everything we did culturally,
Mm,
and we would do it, and then he would explain what we did and why we did it.
mm,
He's like, did you notice we first went here and talked to this person, then we did this, then we did this, and remember, and then we went loop. And so he knew I'm a very culturally aware person, and yet I needed that education. That set me up for every time I went into a country, whether it would be for an audit or for whatever I was doing, to recognize that those things are so important. But because we had so much trust built, we could do it. It took that humbleness and that willingness to do it. Those ideas that what does encouragement look like, how much difference that can make. So before we go too far off tracks, so I see that there was an awareness, there was a lot of research, there was a humbleness to do that. People caught on, you guys built a team. You alluded to it that there's still some hard things that came up once the yes, we need to make a change happened. Tell me about that.
So once we decided to go down this path, a couple of things started to happen. Our team in Kenya started quickly to go through a training program to transition the organization from residential care to family-based care. So now you're getting into the weeds. Now you're starting to figure out how we're going to do this work. And so they got right into it. It was great. We worked with a great organization called Ways of Care in Kenya that helped our team kind of make this transition. We were one of the early adopters once the law came down in Kenya. Now there are many, many more adopting this transition plan. And so you begin to move like, okay, how is this going to work? How are people's jobs going to change? Are there people that may not be here anymore once this transition happens on our staff? Are we going to hire new people? Are we going to retrain the ones that are on? So there's all these staffing questions. And then you have to ask kind of the budgeting questions.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things we learned early on is when you're doing residential care, you're constrained by the number of beds you have. So we only had to raise a certain amount of money to cover those number of beds for that year. Well, when you stop housing kids, but you're working to get as many kids as you can back home and back into their community, reunited, now your constraint is a lot higher. You're not constrained by number of beds. You're actually just constrained by the number of people you can hire. So you have to really pay attention to budget and what are we able to do and what are we not able to do and what's our scope. How far can we go? The kids who find their way to the streets of Nairobi are from all over the country, sometimes as many as 8, 9, 10 hours away. So are we going to work to reunite those kids 10 hours away with their families and communities? And if we're doing that, well, how many can we actually do at one time? The other thing we learned pretty quickly was this is going to take a lot of follow-up visits, right? If you're going to place a child back in a home that they ran away from, it's not just enough to find the home. It's not just enough to find out why they left. It's not just enough to reunite them back into the home. The hardest part is the follow-up. how do you make sure they stay there? Once you put them back in the home, back into school, back in the local community, how do you make sure they stay? And so that's, our program right now includes 2 years of follow-up visits. That's a lot of work. And so we did that. At the same time, our team in the US slowly started trying to figure out, well, how do we message this? How do we talk to our donors who we've told for so long the homes that were bad and the kids are good? And now we got to tell our donors the homes aren't that bad and the kids need to be there. You start trying to figure out how to talk about that. And that's hard. And we got a lot of tough questions. We went on the road the first year in 2024 and started answering questions. And most of the time we're like, we don't know. We're making the change. We think this is for the better. We've seen other organizations do it, but honestly, I don't know how to answer your question right now. Come back. We'll come back in 6 months. Maybe we'll know better. Being able to say you don't know and then still ask people to give you money, that's tough. That's tough. And sometimes they did because they trusted us or they believed in the mission. And sometimes they didn't. Sometimes they said, oh, let me wait till you got a little more evidence and then I'll trust you with my money. And so we learned different ways of talking to donors, different ways of messaging, and we messed up. And we had to be willing in the beginning to mess up and say, hey, we're going to try this. We're going to learn from it, and we're going to do it better the next time. And we're going to mess up, and we're going to learn from it. We're going to do it better the next time. And over the last few years, we've been able to do that so that now not only does our team in Kenya know what they do well and have some evidence to prove that it works, we also have some of the talking points and some of the language to put around it to help show people in the U.S. that this is a better way. The most important thing, I think, and also the most difficult thing, you talk about the hard stuff, what we learned through this process was when you're doing residential care of vulnerable children, and people do this all over the world, right? Almost every country, except for in the U.S. and parts of Europe, almost every country has orphanages or children's homes of some sorts. And you can operate those in isolation. You can kind of do your own thing, right? You get your plot of land, you take care of your kids, you raise your money from your donors to help those missions, and you can operate in isolation. You don't really need to work with others. You don't need partnerships. You don't need to collaborate. You got it. Well, when you transition to family and community-based care, that's out the window. You can't do this in isolation anymore. You can only be successful if you are collaborating with partners and others and making friends along the way. Because number one, the work is just too encompassing. It's just so much going on. You have to learn from others. Even just geographically, like I mentioned, we need partners in other parts of Kenya or even in other countries as we rescue kids from the streets in Nairobi and help those partners can help maybe facilitate the reunification closer to home. But then it's other things. It's the heartache. It's the heartbreak of this work. It's really heartbreaking. You need friends who are doing it beside you in other organizations to say, I know how you feel. Put your arms around each other and let's get through this, because it's heartbreaking to try to help reunite kids back to homes that they left and to really lean into those families and what issues have caused this separation. And the work we're doing is really about mending relationships. Well, to mend relationships, you got to kind of get messy. And when you get messy, you get your heart broken, you get heartache. And I can tell you stories of heartbreak, of being with kids and wanting them to get back home to their parents and them being so excited. And we go to visit the parent and the parent says, I don't want anything to do with this kid. And it would be a little easy to give up right there and say, okay, well, this is too hard. Let's just put them back in our place. And then you're reminded, no, let's do the hard work. Let's keep going back and knocking on that door multiple times to see if that parent changes their mind. Let's see what we could do to help them change their mind. Let's go to a neighbor and use the neighbor's help to change. Like, you're just trying everything you can. Each time you're told no, or each time you're told, I don't want to, take my kid back in, you got to muster up the courage to go back in and do it again. And you got to muster up the willingness to be told no until you see that glimpse of hope. There's that glimpse of hope where the parent says, well, maybe. I just wasn't sure you'd show back up, but now you've showed up here 5, 6, 7 times. I might be willing to listen. And then it's like, okay, now we do the next hardest thing. And then the next hardest thing. And all this work, again, requires you to have partners, requires you to collaborate with others and learn from others. There's some things about reunification that we think we know pretty well, but that's only one piece. There may be 10 other things that other organizations do well. There's an organization we're friends with in Kenya who does really good with financial empowerment and empowering families to get better jobs and to earn more money and to be entrepreneurial. There's another group we work with that's really good at parenting models and training and teaching good parenting. So we're learning from them over here, right? And there's others that are good at education and others that are good at, physical and nutrition and how to make sure a home is, nutritiously safe and thriving for the kid. So there's all these different things, right? And none of us can do it all by ourselves.
Right.
So we learned early on, because we tried to do it by ourselves and it didn't want to work. So now we're doing it with others. We're collaborating with partners in Kenya and even all around the world. This is a global movement, by the way. I'll tell you, it's a global movement to move away from residential care of vulnerable children and into family-based care.
Beautiful. To take from control to collaboration unlocks some things that you actually cannot do in isolation.
That's right.
And yet that's the hard work. And everything I've heard, from the willingness to be humble and keep trying, and being open to people going, we're still figuring this out. If you had to tell donors something, like I'm hoping that a lot of donors to nonprofits listen to this, because it's so important for them to know that, one, it's not just financial. There's so many other ways a lot of times that people can help, but also, what does it look like to trust the people, and also to sniff out when maybe not to trust a nonprofit. But if you could tell an American donor something to understand, what would you tell them?
A couple of things. One, I would say, just like with all of us, be open-minded to different types of solutions. Don't be so headstrong or centered on just one solution. We're all working together in this world to solve some really big, audacious problems. So as a donor, be open to different solutions. There's not just one way to solve it. That's the first thing I would say. I would say number two, ask a lot of questions. Talk to the organizations that you're interested in. Ask them questions. Ask them what they're doing. Ask them how they do it. Don't just listen to the stories they tell. Ask the questions about their methods and what they did to get trained in that method, or what they've learned along the way in the last few years. How have they improved their organization? I would ask questions like that. And then I would say, third, if you can, if it's possible, try to find out long-term success. Short-term success is something that, we talk about quite a bit in the nonprofit world. We have these short-term success numbers, right? Like our kids in the first grade made this scores, and then by the second grade, they made this score. Or we had these people that were sleeping on the streets away from home. They were unhoused, and now they're housed. Next month, they're housed. And so we have these short-term results. We talk about the numbers we talk about. I think donors should lean in and ask more questions about long-term results.
Yes.
What are your long-term results? What happens after a kid graduates high school in your program, if that's what you're doing? Or what happens to a family once they become housed 10 years from now? Do they stay in that home for 10 years, or do they go back to the streets? Whatever program you're working in, ask about the 5, 10, even 20-year results if they have them, or what they expect them to be if they don't have them yet. If you're funding a new project or you're funding a new program as a donor, ask them, like, okay, I see what you're trying to do these first couple of years. How is that going to impact your clients or the people you serve 10, 15, or 20 years from now, if it's a new project? Those are the things I would share with a donor. I hope that's helpful.
That's really, really helpful. Thank you. And I do agree. It's so easy to just write a check. You do want to build trust, but those bigger questions, are there other ways of helping besides the financial?
For us, where we find ourselves right now is really with two important things. Besides the financial, right, we're always looking for people to help fund the daily work and fund the opportunity to reunite kids back with their families. We find a really big part of what we're doing now is education. Educating people on care reform. Educating people on strategies of even aid work and relief work that's more sustainable. That's one of the things I would really encourage people to do is number one, get educated on your own, right? There's so many opportunities today. If you want to learn about any issue or any problem in the world that people are trying to solve, get on the internet, read some articles, dig in, listen to some podcasts, seek out some organizations. There's lots of advocacy organizations out there that are helping. And that's one of the things we want to encourage people is, hey, we want to change the mindset a little bit, change the mindset of American donors who've been building orphanages around the world for the last 75 years. It's time to change that mindset. And so sometimes it's not just about giving your money, it's about, hey, tell somebody that there's other ways. Take that article that you read about how science shows that kids thrive better in families than in a residential center or an orphanage. Take that article, share it with your family. Share it with your neighbors, right? Help be a spokesperson on behalf of what's best for children. And you might come up against some opposition, right? You might share that with a friend or a family member who says, no, I disagree with you. Oh, okay, well, let's talk about it. Talk about the pros and cons. Have those conversations. We need to share more information with one another. That's something that I think is really big. And it's what we're trying to do. As we go around on the road, we're not just asking for money anymore. We do that, but also we just say, hey, we're here to talk. We're here to kind of just share some new insights we found. We want you to know about the science of this. We want you to know what governments are saying around the world. We want you to know what organizations are finding is great long-term results when children are in families. So we're not asking for money. We're just wanting you to know something. I'm going to tell you why. There was a long time we ran our organization and we thought we were doing a great job, but we didn't know what we didn't know. We didn't know. We weren't asking those questions. We had never kind of uncovered that there may be some problems with kids living in residential facilities. So we didn't know. Well, now we know. And when you know something, you can't unknow it anymore. It's not like we can say, oh, we know that. We know that it's better for kids to live in families, but yeah, we're going to choose to forget about that. We're going to choose not to know. You can't do that. You can't. You already know it. You now have to deal with what you're going to do with that knowledge. And so we want more people, especially in the U.S., and around the world, to know that kids thrive in families. Kids thrive when they're in local communities long term. Kids do not thrive long term when they're in residential care facilities. They don't. And in fact, there's a lot of consequences those kids are left with as adults. Those kids are left out of family conversations as adults. It breaks my heart. Those kids are dealing with separation trauma because they never reconciled with their family member. They're dealing with just being isolated and alone, some of them. The more people can know this, the more people can understand this, they can spread the word. And there's a great organization we work with called Faith to Action. They're kind of bridging the gap between those in the Christian world and the secular world that are looking at this problem. I love what they're doing because they're saying, hey, this is, we could call it bipartisan or bi-religious. I don't know. It's, whether you're religious or not religious, we're saying the same thing, and we can pull this cart together towards family reunification. So I love what Faith to Action does. They put together some great points on their website, videos and infographics to help people understand this better. So I'd point people that way. I'd point people to just do some search on care reform around the world. If there's a country you care about a lot, see what's happening in that country. Could be in Europe, could be in Asia, could be in Africa, could be in Latin America. Anywhere in the world, there's probably a country that you care about that is seeking some help in reforming how they care for children. So get out there and learn.
When we talked last time, you talked about a chicken story. And what does it look like when a family finally clicks into that self-sufficiency that really allows them to not only to be able to unite their families, but know that they can provide for them?
This is a really powerful story that happened to us early on when we made this change. And it really helps us understand how asking questions about your work can lead to other questions, which lead to better results. We got into care reform to help provide more opportunities for children to thrive in families and for children to be in school more permanently, or for children's lives to be changed by being a part of a local community, maybe even a local church. That's why we got into this. But as we got into it, what we discovered is we've got to do this in a sustainable way so that the families can solve their problems, not us solving the problem again for them. It takes a lot of visits, as I mentioned already, knocking on doors and just showing up. That's the first most important work you got to do is just show up. And so we had some team members that were showing up at this mom's house. The mom had a couple of kids who had ran away to the streets because there wasn't enough to eat. It was just a lack of resources, a lack of food. And so they had left to find food and come back, find food, come back. Eventually, they just didn't come back. They stayed on the streets. And they'd been out there for a while. Our team met these two kids on the streets, found out where their mom lived, and started showing up. And the first few visits, it was like, I don't really want to talk to you. I'm not interested. And they'd show up again. And after showing up, eventually, we talk about trust, you start building trust because you keep showing up. So they sat down with this lady And they begin to talk to her about, we want to help your children move back in with you, but we want to make sure you can provide for them. And she said, well, I can't. I'm actually really glad y'all are out there helping my kids on the street because I can't provide for them. And they talked to her about how, that's not the best for the kids. It'd be better for them to be with you. And she said, oh, I love them. That'd be great, but I can't do anything for them. And they said, well, what do you have? She said, I have nothing. They said, okay, we're going to come back next week. Think about it. See if there's anything you have. So they go away. They come back. The next week they say, okay, we're back talking to you. What do you have? And she goes, I have nothing. And they go, well, keep searching. Talk to your neighbors. See if there's anything you have that could help your children be fed and nurtured and put into school. To come back next time. Okay, we're here. She's like, hey, they can tell something's different this time. She's like, I've been thinking about this question for the last couple of weeks, and I know I don't have much, but I have a chicken. And their eyes lit up and their faces got bright, and they said, all right, let's start there. So they sat down, they started talking to her about the chicken. What does the chicken do? What can you do with the chicken? And she said, the chicken does lay some eggs. And they said, okay, what do you do with the eggs? She goes, I don't know. They kept talking. She said, well, I guess I could use the eggs to cook some stuff to sell to some of my neighbors. And they said, try it, see what happens. Just try it. And they tried it. They came back a week later. She said, you're not going to believe it. I got the eggs from the one chicken. It was just enough to feed a couple people near me, and I made a little bit of money, and I'm thinking about buying another chicken. That story kept going for months. And after about 6 months, this lady had created a whole chicken coop. I think she had 6 or 8 chickens. They were all laying eggs. She was now selling the eggs and cooking with the eggs and had created a little business. Her children moved back in with her, and she was able to support them and pay for most of their school fees. And it was great. Our organization came along and helped with some of the school fees, but she was able to help with some of them. And that created a dignity and a pride for her that she never thought was possible. Never thought was possible. And so it was a great lesson for us to learn about sustainable solutions. It's not always the way we would do it, right? We might take her and put her in college and get her a new job. Or we might decide to just raise some money and give the money to her so she can buy food for her kids. Or we might go buy the food at the grocery store and bring her a big bag. There's all these different ways to solve the problem. But we realized none of those other ways are sustainable. She has to come to the conclusion. And so when we learn that sustainable solution story, we're like, okay, that needs to be our role now. That needs to be our model. And again, it's not always the way we would do it, right?
Yeah.
And but it's her way, and it's what she got excited about, and what she now has pride in. And I've got a bunch of other stories like that are great to tell, and that's what keeps you going, right? Despite the hard stuff, despite learning that maybe we didn't do it the best way, and now we can do it better. Despite all of that, you have these glimmers of hope and excitement when you see a family change or a kid go back home, or a family be reunited. The stories of the kids running and hugging their parent after these months and months and months of work to bond them back together, and running and hugging. I mean, it's just like, okay, that's why we do it. That's it right there.
It's right there. Brad, thank you so much. Thanks for what you do. You're a great spokesperson, vision caster, but also you're leading with humility and with curiosity. You're changing lives. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Marla. It's great to be talking with you today, and I look forward to seeing all the people that you get to talk to and all the great things you learn from them along the way. Our organization is Remade. Our website is remadekenya.org, just remadekenya.org. Go check it out, see what we're doing over there. Get out there and look for ways to help other organizations with care reform. We want to move as many kids in this world out of orphanages and out of care facilities into families and communities. That's a great thing we could see happening with sustainable solutions. We're all about it. We're all about it.
I will put that stuff in the show notes. I need to have you back just to share stories with us.
Yeah. Hey, one of the things that people keep asking me is it working? And I say, well, we're collecting data. Give me a little more time give some more data, and then I'll come back and share, some more stories of how it's working with some real data. I think some data would be really helpful to show people that this actually has some legs to it, some sustainability.
Yeah. Okay. That's a promise.
Awesome.
Thank you, Brad.
Thanks, Marla.
All right. Thank you for watching What Works. Until next time, lead with clarity, with compassion, and with calmness. If today's conversation is landing for you, if something that what Brad described felt desirable, I'd invite you to take the SAFE assessment. It shows exactly where you're regulated and where you're leaking. The link is in the show notes. Until then, lead with presence and take care of yourself.